And we're live for a special edition of Trek Live. What are we doing today, Bill?
Heck yeah, we are doing the first ever Trek Live edition of the Trekkie Awards, Trekkie Award nominations for Star Trek Discovery Season 1. So, for those who maybe don't know, people who haven't followed me on Twitter for, going on, I guess, 3 years now almost, since I started doing this, I have um, Oscar style award nominations and winners for each season of Star Trek. So up until now, I've had 28 editions of this. I do things like best episode, best performance by a series lead. So it's got to be somebody who's in the main.
Uh-oh. I think we lost Bill for a second. Let's check the stream. Stream's good. Lost Bill for a second there. I haven't got a text from him. Hold on, guys. Oh. Okay, like Bill was saying, I'll take over from now. He uh, he does these Trekkie nominations for pretty much every season of Trek there has been ever. So definitely go check that out. It's on his Twitter page. He's got a website about it. Really cool, interesting stuff. Yeah. So it looks like Bill's having some technical issues. We'll be right back, hopefully. Just hold on 1 second. All right, guys, I'm back. Just to update you guys. There was some technical difficulties with Bill, so I want to talk about just some thoughts about some of the podcasts I've been listening to, and this. I'm just trying to fill some space, so this may be more an in-depth, um, kind of me talking about what podcasts I've been listening to. So I'll bring up my podcast app. I think this week there were some heavy hitters with some episodes posted, some great content. Um, there's a new Ready Room out. That's by Trek FM. That's was an awesome podcast. They talk about what the document that was on to plug another podcast. That's getting confusing. The Trek Files. Um, so definitely the Ready Room, always a great. That actually might be my favorite podcast out there. And then, of course, I'll let Bill kind of preface this one when he gets back. But Trek Ranks, always a great listen for sure. I've been listening to this new um, podcast that I just found. I don't know if you guys know this, but you guys probably do. Diehard Trek Live crew members will know that both Bill and I are movie buffs. So, Cinemaholics, I've just found that out. They usually do kind of movie reviews, any movie out there, but a particular one caught my eye. Um, um, it's the top 5 remakes of all time. And I thought that was a really interesting topic um, because I think it's that's a really heavily discussed topic, so that's why I wanted to listen to it. So, um, yeah, if you guys haven't, check out Cinemaholics. I'm doing that because Bill just got here, I think.
I am here.
Okay, cool.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're back.
Thank goodness. uh, I was talking and it cut out. Do you where any idea where it cut off?
Yeah, no, let's just go from the top.
Go from the top.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to do a quick run through of the Trekkie Award nominations for Discovery Season 1. They are Oscar style nominations that go category by category for a specific season. If those who have followed me for a long time know that I do this for each individual season of Star Trek. I started doing it back in 2015 when I did my first big rewatch, logging everything on Twitter. As I finished the season, I would do this and ask people for input and kind of take quick polls to see what people thought. And this is my first time doing this for a season that is new and kind of like first time around watching it and trying to piece together what I want to do. And definitely not easy, particularly for this show because of the nature of the show being serialized largely, long running story arcs, things building over time. Some episodes, as we've discussed many times about Discovery, are very individual, standalone story style episodes that are easier to pinpoint, and some of them are maybe a little less so. So that's one important thing. Kind of doubling back a little bit with the Trekkie Awards for those who are unfamiliar. If I'm nominating for the nominations for something like best performance by a series lead, it has to be somebody in the main credits of the show for the main title sequence. It has to be somebody's name, and somebody's name has to be in that title sequence to qualify. And it's not a matter of just saying, oh, it's DS9 season 7. Avery Brooks is my nominee. He's one of the nominees. It has to be Avery Brooks in episode ... Like what's the episode that stands out for him? So in this case, I can't just pick Sonequa Martin Green. It has to be Sonequa Martin Green in such and such episode. So that's where a lot of the challenges come in. That's where a lot of the time was spent trying to figure out, make heads or tails. But the time has come, and I'm ready to put these out there, get people's thoughts, get your thoughts, Dan. I'm looking forward to maybe over the next week putting little polls out there on Twitter, finding out what people think about not only what I nominated, what should win out of the nominees I have, but what people would nominate differently. Like if maybe you don't agree with any of the 5 or 3 that I picked, depending on the category. Maybe you have your own complete different idea, and I love that. I want to hear your thoughts on these. I'm hoping that this is just a conversation starter, and these are not like in stone. These are
Set in
the
stone, yeah.
definitive. These are not the Academy Awards. These are mine. These are my personal things. So definitely open to hearing suggestions and ideas from everybody out there.
So, Bill, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. You first. What were you gonna say?
So, we're Bill and I are gonna be using his nominees because we both made a list, but they're really similar. So we're just gonna go off that. Bill and I are gonna just go category by category.
Yeah. So I think I'm just gonna start at the bottom of my little document here, and work my way up to the bigger categories. These are going to be more technical in nature. For some of us, you, Dan, this first one was a big one. I would think best visual effects.
Yeah, that's I got a bone to pick. Why was it at the bottom? It should be at the top.
I don't know. I guess on most Academy Award lists I've seen, visual effects tends to make its way to the bottom of the list somehow. I agree. It shouldn't
Makes
be.
me
It should
sad.
It is sad. It's very sad. But I'm just copying off of how most similar lists appear online. And real quick, just to be clear, these technical categories, I nominate 3. I choose 3. For this show, some of these categories I easily could have gone to 5, just because of the expertise, like how technically proficient the show is. It would be easy to pick 5 in some of these categories, but I did only do 3. And in the bigger categories, teleplay, directing, the performance ones, best episode, there are 5. So for best visual effects, I chose Battle of the Binary Stars, Into the Forest I Go, and What's Past is Prologue. Just right off the bat, Dan, what do you think? Do you have any pick? Anything I left out egregiously?
I think that those are perfect. Those were my 3. Definitely some heavy hitter episodes. To me, just fast forwarding to our next episode of this type of video stream, that's an easy pick for me, but we'll see.
Yeah. I'm not going to comment much on where I'm leaning. In some of these categories, I've got pretty locked in stone winners already picked. I know what I'm doing, and I know what my thoughts are. And in some of these categories, I'm much more up in the air and struggling a little bit with making that final call. Not going to say where I am on visual effects or on any of these really, but that's interesting, and I can't wait to hear what you think. We are going to be next weekend. We'll talk more about this at the end of the stream, and again tomorrow for our regular episode. We're gonna have an episode next weekend where we choose our winners and make a big deal out of that, and kind of advocating and explaining why this or that. This is going to be a shorter, kind of just breezing through the nominations, quick thoughts, and then I think next week we'll dive in deeper into each category and why we picked this and maybe not that. But by all means, I'm very interested in everybody in the chat. Anybody who's in there, I see Grappler Zorn. How you doing? And I see Adam in here too. If you have thoughts, throw them out there, and I'm happy to discuss anything. So yeah, visual effects is in the books. Best musical score. I have Into the Forest I Go. I have Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, and I have The Vulcan Hello. Any thoughts there? Anything really stand out as a? You left that out. I mean,
it's tough to not get into what I'm kind of feeling. But I really enjoyed the scores in all the episodes. I think they did a great job of setting the tones, setting moods. So yeah.
This is definitely a category that the serialized nature of the show and
really tough.
The high production qualities consistently that are there make this very difficult to make heads or tails of. You can probably get away with a lot of different combinations of 3 or 5 if you wanted to go 5 deep in this kind of category. Jeff Russo scored all of the episodes, unlike most of the other Star Trek shows, all of the other Star Trek shows. Just for, quick tidbit, I'm sure anybody who's watching this show probably knows this, but, the other Star Trek shows have tended to have 2 or more composers that kind of alternate episode to episode. Because they're 26 episode seasons, and just, I guess by the nature of TV back then, the fast around episode to episode, what they're doing on Discovery was not happening then. One composer kind of having one vision of music throughout the entire season. In TNG, you had the first half of the show, you had Dennis McCarthy scoring half the episodes and Ron Jones scoring the other half. And by that, but because of that system, some of the scores may have been, if you have a really keen ear for it, if you're really listening for it, you can kind of tell the difference between a couple of composers and different styles, and that can maybe lead you to maybe picking, having an easier time choosing maybe for some of those shows than this show, given that it's one composer the entire time. So those are my 3 there. For film editing, which is a really nitty gritty category, that's, this is one that I always have a hard time with because I'm not an editor. I don't know how much experience you might have, Dan, because you obviously studied film production and did a lot of stuff with this kind of stuff. But I have no experience with editing anything. I just know from following the Oscars and being a big movie guy and kind of learning on the fly what my perception of good editing is. So I'm not by any means qualified to be dishing out awards, like really prestigious awards for film editing. But for my money, I have Lethe, I have Into the Forest I Go, and I have Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. And any thoughts there?
That's just I think that's a good lineup. I think that when I think about editing, I think there's just there's so much more editing done in Discovery than past Star Trek. So I think that it's definitely fun to go through each episode and look, see what the pacing is, see how long the shots are, see if anything is like too long or not long enough.
Yeah.
And how scenes breathe and the pacing and stuff like I touched on before. But yeah.
I think that's a really good point that you just made, that Discovery is a whole different animal compared to the other shows in this regard, because of how many storylines are going on. The style of the storytelling is different than what we're used to in old school Trek. So I think the editing is probably more pronounced if you're looking at it. I'll just say this, for my money, like for the 3 that I picked, I feel like I have 2, Lethe and Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, that have very noticeable editing. Like they're structurally unique and different, and they're things that when I think of those episodes, they're things that really go to the forefront of my mind when I'm thinking of them. And Into the Forest I Go is a little more traditional in terms of, like, it doesn't have anything really flashy going on in terms of structurally, the structure side of it, but it does balance a lot of things happening that are all kind of equally important. You have all kinds of storylines culminating and big things happening on all sides of the coin. So different kinds of styles there, at least in my mind. So that's a tough one for me to choose. I'll say that's one that I am struggling with. So I'm definitely eager to hear what people think. If I left something big off, or if I got the 3 right, which one would people choose if they were in a position to? Moving on, I have Best Costume Design. I have Despite Yourself. I have Vaulting Ambition, and I have the Vulcan Hello. A couple of these design categories before I get your thoughts real quick. I'll just say this about these next couple especially. Spoiler alert, you're going to see the Vulcan Hello pop up a couple of times, and I always struggle with this, even going back to the other shows. Like, clearly the pilot has a lot of design elements that are, everything about the show is like, if you're trying to narrow it to like what's introduced in that episode, what's unique to that episode, everything is unique and introduced in the pilot. So if you're even talking about like Voyager season 1, if you're talking about art direction and costume design and cinematography, even like the visual language of the show,
Mm-hmm.
it's all there in Caretaker. Like it's all kind of established in Caretaker. So the pilot tends to factor very heavily in these categories for all the shows. But anything stand out for you there?
I
In
was just gonna say that I think that this is a really tough one because the design elements that make an impact on me kind of linger throughout the show, the way this show is kind of set up. So that's going to be another tough one that I'm going to go back and forth on, and then I don't have a sure pick right now that I'm going to have to think about. So
yeah, that's definitely the challenge there. The Vulcan Hello kind of represents the long running standards of the show,
yep.
design wise, but then you have some really big stuff that's more isolated in episodes like Despite Yourself and certainly in Vaulting Ambition. So interesting conversations to be had there in the future. For best art direction, I have Vaulting Ambition, the Vulcan Hello again, and Will You Take My Hand, the season finale. Kind of echoing real quick with costume design, same thing with Vulcan Hello. It establishes so much and it's kind of integral to the design of the show. So it's got to be there. And then some more standalone style choices there with the other two. Anything stand out to you?
I just I would definitely say the same thing, echoing what I said before. Um, I think that this these past two categories have definitely jumped up on my list as far as what I think about in the show, because I feel like there's so much production value in the look and design of it. So I think it's gonna be fun to discuss going down the road.
Yeah, I absolutely. Yeah, just to echo that, it's there's a lot to talk about when we really get into the nitty gritty. I think next week with a lot of these categories, and art direction certainly no exception. For best cinematography, I have Despite Yourself, I have The Vulcan Hello, and I have The Wolf Inside. Thoughts?
I'm really excited about this category because I think that the past cinematography in Star Trek, it's almost has its own box, and you can really feel the creativity of the production team in the cinematography, as opposed to past series. So I'm really excited to kind of highlight their awesome work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There were times in some of these other shows, some of the more traditional Trek, a category like cinematography, sometimes would be a little more challenging to find. Three that really stand out. These shows look great. They've held up really well over the years. Deep Space Nine, Voyager, TNG, but just because of the consistent style being more conservative on those shows, cinematography doesn't always necessarily pop out as like a whoa, that's flashy, that really stands out, as opposed to just being workman-like, really strong on a consistent basis. Where on this show, because of, like you said, the more ambitious nature of the production quality, there are elements of the cinematography that really pop for me in certain episodes. In all the episodes, again, like it is consistently outstanding, but a couple of these in particular really stood out to me and were must-haves on this list. Cool. Well, getting into the hardcore stuff here. These are getting into the 5 nominees per category stuff. Heavy hitters. We're gonna start with best director. I have Context is for Kings by Akiva Goldsman. I have Despite Yourself, Jonathan Frakes. I have Into the Forest I Go, Chris Byrne. I have What's Past is Prologue, and I'm going to butcher this, but I think it's Olatunde Osunsami. I hope I got that right. And The Wolf Inside by T.J. Scott. What do you think?
This is interesting because people see the name Jonathan Frakes and immediately want to go there. But I think there are some really talented people working on this as far as direction, and I think that's cool that there is that going on here.
Yeah, there's a lot of good picks. Like you said, Frakes' name obviously stands out a lot. Kiva Goldsman's another name that is certainly not as prominent as Frakes in the Trek community, but
Yeah.
Kiva Goldsman is a fairly big name. He's an Academy Award-winning writer. He wrote A Beautiful Mind back in 2001 and won an Oscar for that. And he is a executive producer on Discovery, so he's a name that you see a lot. He's written, he wrote the pilot, co-wrote the pilot, co-wrote the finale, and directed the finale as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a name that pops up a lot more. I think Olatunde Osunsami's name is in the main credits as well as a co-executive producer. I think he's like their head director, kind of like the point man for the different directors that come and go.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of a big name, but Chris Byrne and TJ Scott are guys that directed one episode apiece that are newcomers to the Star Trek family. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a decent mix here. You have the old timer with Frakes and a couple of staples on the show that I think we're going to see going forward for sure. Mm-hmm. And Goldsman and Shinsami, and then TJ Scott and Chris Byrne are two people that I certainly, they were chosen as Trekkie Award nominees for this season. So I certainly hope they're back in season 2, but mm-hmm. They're less prominent names on, I think, the tips of people's tongues when they're talking about Star Trek directors at this point. Mm-hmm. So, like the Academy Awards, Best Director and Best Episode tend to go pretty often hand in hand for me. So this is a big category for me. There's some difficult decisions to make about whether or not I'm lining that up with episode or not. Mm-hmm. But I have a week to make up my mind entirely there. Best Teleplay. I have Context is for Kings, Gretchen J. Berg, Aaron Harberts, and Craig Sweeney. I have Lethe, Joe Menosky and Ted Sullivan. I have Into the Forest I Go, Bowie Kim and Erica Lapolte. I have What's Past is Prologue, Ted Sullivan, and The Wolf Inside by Lisa Randolph. So pretty similar to the director, which is, spoiler alert, similar to episode. These 3 categories tend to be pretty similar with a couple different things thrown in there. But anything there really stand out to you different?
I think that I just want to highlight that there's a good mix of well-known people and not so, I guess, but definitely talented. And I think that I'd love to give a shout out to the writers because I think that they did a great job. They definitely know their Trek, or they find people who do and include that in the show. And I think there's proof in the pudding, I guess. There's great writing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Mm-hmm. Another thing I'll just throw out there, as I look at that list of episodes, I see 2 episodes that are like firmly in the front half of the season, kind of establishing the show. Mm-hmm. Context is for Kings and Lethe are like very prominent, well, not very clearly like first half of the first season episodes. You have Into the Forest I Go, which is like the pivot point, the mid-season finale that kind of launches into what's left in the season, and then you have The Wolf Inside and What's Past is Prologue, which are in the kind of the heart of the Mirror Universe arc. So this category runs the gamut. It has episodes that represent the different kind of corners of the season, different parts of the season. So I'm hoping that what that conveys is the strength of the show from beginning to end. That from each chunk of the season, there are representatives in a category like this. Yeah. Getting into the performance stuff here, I have for Best Guest Star. So to be clear, these are actors who are not featured as starring in the main title sequence. There is one actor in here who is in the main title sequence, but is listed as a special guest star. So she is in the main titles, but she is not credited as a series regular, so she appears here. So I have Mary Chieffo as Laurel in C.V. Pacem Parabellum. I have James Frain as Sarek in Lethe. I have Kenneth Mitchell as Cole in Into the Forest I Go. I have Rainn Wilson, of course, as Harry Mudd in Magic to Make the Same Man Go Mad. And I have Michelle Yeoh as Philippa Georgiou in Battle at the Binary Stars. Anybody crazy left off here? Here's a question for you. Do any of these, and we can certainly get more into this next week, but just real quick, gut instinct reaction, are any of these episodes wrong? Like, do you see any of these actors paired with the incorrect episode in your mind?
Um, it's tough because the with that question, the name that I
Mhm.
go to is Michelle Yeoh, and I think it's tough because she does a great job almost playing two characters
She
almost. So
does. Yeah.
that's a really tough pick for me. And to kind of tough pick meaning to which episode do you pair that with? And I like this format because it makes it tough.
Yes.
So I'm definitely gonna have some thinking to do, but I'll just say that's a and I guess the the rest of the nominations that we're gonna go off some heavy hitters. This category being one of them, it's gonna be tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of these are really difficult. Obviously Rainn Wilson was a pretty clear cut.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're going to nominate him, you're probably going to nominate him for that episode.
Yeah.
Uh, if you're going to nominate James Frain, you're probably going to nominate him for Lethe. I
Yep.
guess there are a couple other directions you could go in, but that's probably going to be the universal choice. Um, Kenneth Mitchell's not in a ton of episodes, but Cole is a pretty big character
Mm-hmm.
um, in the episodes he's featured in,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's the episode that he's the most showcased in. So some of these are a little more natural choices, but Mary Chieffo I really struggled with for a long time as Laurel, like which episode to kind of highlight her in, um, because she's in it a lot. She's in a
Yeah.
lot of episodes, but
She's
she's in a
hanging
lot of
around.
episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she like pops in for a scene here and
Yeah.
there, and her scene a lot of the time is kick ass. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she's in a big important linchpin scene for an episode, but I wanted to find an episode where she's a little more um, integrated into the real driving force of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I just I'm sure I'll talk about this more next week, but I'll just defend this pick because I feel like maybe some people will have different ideas. Her scenes with the Admiral, Admiral Cornwell, in that episode when the Admiral's in captivity and you're kind of toying with, what is she trying to do?
Yeah.
Uh, that whole, like, I think Mary Chieffo really walks that line well, and keeps you guessing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might be her most complicated performance. So
Couldn't
that's
agree
why I
more.
picked that. Thanks. um, just a couple things in the chat. Grappler Zorn, I think I remember you saying this in on Twitter when I've asked things like which favorite episode, least favorite episode. I think I recall you talking about Magic being towards the bottom of your list, maybe even your weakest, and um, so I get that. There are certainly other options out there
Mm-hmm.
to choose from if you're not a Harry Mudd guy, not a Rainn Wilson guy. I guess my question to you, Grappler, would be if you were doing these nominations and you didn't want to include Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd, who would you put into that place? Like, if you're relatively satisfied with those other actors, 4 of the 5, and you just want to remove Rainn Wilson, who's the other guest star that you'd like to see
Mm-hmm.
in that category? So if you're still hanging around here, Grappler, I hope you can hit me up with that. Um, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping up to series lead, just a couple categories left. I have this is really difficult.
This is tough.
Because, and I'm sure this is really tough because I'm by my rules I can only pick 5, right?
Yes.
And there are 6 actors who are in the main title sequence for Star Trek Discovery. So if I limit myself, which I haven't always done, TNG, I'm famous for picking. There are seasons where 3 of the 5 performances that I nominated for series lead belong to Patrick Stewart. Like, I'll do 3 episodes for an actor if that's the way I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But for this, I ended up going 1 performance per actor, but I had to leave one of them off. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you disagree with who I left off here because I know how you feel about this actor and this character, Dan. And I feel the same way. This is really tough. But I just to run through them real quick, I chose Doug Jones for What's Past His Prologue. I picked Shazad Latif for The Wolf Inside. I picked Sonequa Martin Green for Lethe. Anthony Rapp for Vaulting Ambition, and Mary Wiseman for Despite Yourself. So clearly the name that is omitted from that list is Jason Isaacs.
How dare you, sir? How dare you? I've been waiting all stream to just roast you with this pick. Really?
I don't know.
You left him off.
I left him
You
off.
left him off.
It's the snub of
The century. Not the century, but
snub.
it's
of the franchise. It may be the worst snub of my history of the Trekkie Awards. It was painful. I didn't know what to do. Um, I don't want to. There were a couple of people, performers, actors who I toyed with taking off and putting Isaacs in place of. Not sure I want to get into which of them I thought of doing that with yet. I might save that for next week. Um, but it was tough. It was just tough. I mean, if I had 6 slots, if I wanted to break a rule and just do 6, I could easily and happily, fit Jason Isaacs in there. But I stuck hard and fast to my rule, and to be honest, what I did was I toyed with it, I played with it, I changed it here and there, and
Mm-hmm.
I did it a million times, and then eventually I just said I'm done. Like I just left it where I was, and I just did a pencils down. I'm done, and that's where I was when I stopped because I just had to stop going back and forth at some point. There had to be a deadline. So, yeah, I guess I'll ask you. We'll talk about it this week. But who? This is always my favorite question to ask when people say, "Well, take this person out or take that thing out." Who would you take out? Like, if you could only pick 5 of these, who's the actor that you drop off that list to fit Isaacs in?
It's tough because I think I might take. Do I have to have one or two?
You can. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can if you wanted to nominate
I think
Jason Isaacs twice. You certainly could, but you'd probably have to leave 2 of these actors off in order
I
to do that.
think I would change out Anthony Rapp with
Mm-hmm.
Jason Isaacs. I know
Mm-hmm.
I love all of his performances are great. I think that Jason Isaac did a better job just overall.
Yeah, what's killing me, I'm on the record in these episodes of Trek Live talking about, particularly back in the first half of the season, before we knew and before we were really getting led on to believe that he wasn't what he appeared to be. Talking about my favorite character on the show being Lorca, back to like Lethe and Magic to Make the Saints Man Go Mad, back in that part of the season, because he's the character I spent the most time thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can say that, then how can I, in good conscience,
Yeah.
leave him off? I get it. That is, there's no right way to do that. I freely admit that I effed up. There's got to be a different way to do this, to fit him in. But and to be fair too, when I went back and rewatched, I was even more impressed with Jason Isaacs as Lorca, because with the context of knowing what Lorca is as you're watching the first half of the first season, there's so many little Easter eggs and little hints that are really cool. And it just makes his performance that much more complicated and impressive. So it's painful. I get it. And there's going to be a lot more discussion about this, I'm sure, next week, where we hopefully dive into maybe each character and each actor and talk a little more in-depthly about this category. But for now, I'm just going to leave that there. And I'm ready to hear.
Yeah, there's some conversation in the chat. Adam is with you actually on this. Can't remove any of them. So, man.
It's hard. It's really hard. I mean, Anthony Rapp is somebody who, again, like I agree with you. I'll just say this real quick. You had mentioned that he's probably the one you would leave off, and I love Anthony Rapp. I love Stamets. His performances are consistently excellent.
Mm-hmm.
He and Mary Wiseman are the 2 actors that I was kind of wavering in and out with Isaacs. Like I knew only 2 of those 3 were going to get in, and this is where I ended up. But if I was to delete the stream, pretend it never happened, and went back and just did the nominations all over again, I'd probably end up with a different combination. But this is where I stopped. This is the official time-stamped version. So that's where we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
So just to wrap it up, best episode. I have Context is for Kings. I have Lethe. I have Into the Forest I Go, What's Past is Prologue, and The Wolf Inside. So this is a 5-for-5 match with the teleplay writing category, and just like I said there, um, yes, I'm aware. Again, same thing I said about the writing category. I like that this kind of episodes represent each kind of corner of the season. You have episodes from the first half towards the beginning. You have episodes in the Mirror Universe chunk of it. You have the mid-season finale, which kind of bridges the divide there. I think it speaks to the quality of the show in the long run, like the overall arc of the show. I think I know your choice, Dan, just because we've
Yes.
talked a lot about um, our episode of choice as we've kind of gone along, recapping episodes. And anybody who's listened to the newly released Trek Ranks episode kind of already knows my choice because we did our favorite episode. So that's certainly no secret. I'm not going to say it right here. I'm going to save that for next week, but it's certainly out there for people to discern if they are up on my Trek Live or Trek Live appearances and other podcasts I've done. It's certainly not a secret, but I'll save it for next week for now. Are there any episodes that you would have definitely included in this list of 5, Dan? Like, is this?
I don't think so. I'm looking at my list,
Mhm.
and I think they are the same. But I think this is just a kind of a testament to how strong this first season is. For me there is a clear winner, but there's close second, third, fourth, fifth. So that's a testament to the season and how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah, my winner is pretty clear for me. There's some separation. My second choice is closer than I would say it's fairly close. Like there's um, I'm confident in my choice, but there is a strong second place. I guess I'll say it that way. And then after that, there might be a little bit of a drop off where I'm, talking about episodes that I'm not as comfortable talking about as like the best, just really solid nominees, as opposed to like, ooh, this was in contention to actually win the award. So for like the which one is going to win conversation, there are 2 for me that are comfortably in that conversation. But we'll save that for next week too. There's a lot to talk about. I'm looking forward to, like I said earlier in the show, kind of throwing these categories out there on Twitter, hoping to hear some feedback. What do people think? I'm expecting in the episode category, just from previous poll questions and such, previous conversations that have happened on Twitter. I know that a really commonly cited favorite episode is Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. I know Grappler Zoran, you're not a fan, and you're certainly not alone. It's a polarizing episode. There's a population of people out there who would have that towards the bottom of their list, but there is also a very large population of people who would cite that as their favorite episode. So I would expect some disagreement there that I didn't nominate that. I have that more towards the middle of the pack for me, maybe in the 7 or 8 range in my rankings. Yeah.
Choose Your Pain was close for me, but I think there's just so much more with these other episodes. But
Choose Your Pain is an episode that I remember you being really high on going back, and have been pretty consistently high on. And I'll just say this: if I was to the episode that I had written down for Jason Isaacs was Choose Your Pain. Like if Jason Isaacs would have been nominated for series lead for me, Choose Your Pain would have been the episode. Do you agree with that? If
I totally agree with that.
Do you think that was his best episode?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he is complicated and challenging. Like you're put in positions to hate him in that episode, but he makes it impossible to do that. Some of the information that you get, the reveal of what they think happened to the Baran with him, should have been like a hard red line for a lot of people. Like, he's done. Like, I can't get behind him. Get him out of here. I can't root for him. But Isaacs is so good and so charismatic, and does such a good job of kind of portraying this character who's kind of, well, part of the beauty of the performance is that nothing is as it seems. But at the time, you're thinking he's this broken guy who's trying to pull himself out of the weeds and lift himself back up again. And that makes him charismatic, and you want to root for him. But obviously, as it turns out, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen, if you're watching this foolishly, he's not what he appears to be. None of those hints and none of those things that you think you're thinking in Choose Your Pain are really accurate. But his performance is his performance in that episode. I mean, it's top of the line work, I think. Yep. So yeah, next Sunday, right?
Yep, next
Sunday, which is Oscar Sunday, appropriately. We're going to be revealing winners in these categories. For me, Dan's going to pick his favorites from these categories.
Yep.
And again, I'm hoping to get some responses out there on social media to maybe put together a little list of like community favorites, social media votes, Trek Live crew member votes, whatever we're going to call that. If we get enough responses to have a discernible result, we'll certainly reveal those as well and put out some statistics, some vote totals. So keep an eye out there if you're inclined to respond to such things. Some of these categories, the stupid Twitter poll limits, I can't put out a poll, like a clean poll for 5 choices, which really sucks. Some of these categories, but for the technical stuff, I can certainly put out, a poll for each and just kind of see where they go. So I'm probably going to go ahead and do that in the next few days. But I'll certainly be posing questions about some of those other categories to see what people are thinking and how they would vote. So looking forward to hearing from everybody. And I appreciate Grappler Zorn and Adam for dropping in kind of late notice. We kind of announced a couple of days ago that we were toying with this and probably going to go ahead and do a live stream to just do this real quick. And appreciate you making time to drop in last minute.
Yep. Any final thoughts? Anything? Wrap it up.
Yeah, just looking forward to getting these out there, and it was really fun. It was really a breath of fresh air and exciting to like dive right back in and be doing Trekkie Awards again. I haven't really touched these in a long time. My last rewatch, I toyed with some of them here and there a little bit, but these were mostly put together a few years ago. So it was refreshing and cool to be thinking in those terms again, as a lot of fun. Yep. Do we want to talk about real quick what we're doing tomorrow?
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, you can preface what we're doing tomorrow and wrap.
Yeah, we are going to have a quick, well, not quick. We're going to have a regular episode of Trek Live. This is an abbreviated version, a little shorter than our usual, but we're going to have a full conversation on the first season of Next Generation, which I know you're watching, Dan.
Yep.
So we're going to have a special guest, Jordan, who has been on a couple of times, who has some pretty strong feelings about TNG Season 1. He's a defender. He's a fan. So looking forward to having some interesting conversation there. Season 1 of TNG brings out a lot of strong feelings. A lot of people have really hard line opinions about whether or not it's rightfully kind of tagged as maybe the worst season of Trek ever. And some people defend it and think it's got a kind of a bum rap. So looking forward to hearing what you think, Dan, as somebody who's freshly watched it, and having Jordan on as somebody who is more on the positive end of things with that season and diving in and just pulling it apart.
Yep. Definitely excited to do that. Yep. You guys know the drill. The discussion doesn't have to stop here. We don't want it to stop here. We want to hear your guys' Trekkie Award nominations. Come over to Twitter, our Facebook page, the Discord channel. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Super excited about this. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Yes.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Appreciate it. I am not Mirror Bill, by the way, real quick. Grappler Zorn thinks I'm Mirror Bill for not choosing Lorca and Jason Isaacs. So I promise I'm not.
Or is he? All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow.